New Orleans Saints head coach Kellen Moore shows off his genius building a big play for multiple weeks. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, I'll tell you why a veteran cornerback addition could mean more playing time for young players in the secondary. We'll dive into some of the things that the New Orleans Saints defense need to prove on Sunday up against the New York Giants, including, of course, that they are truly takeaway machines like they looked up against the New York Giants. And we'll kick everything off with Kellen Moore flexing some muscles and showing off his genius when it came to his 87-yard play, which he's been building for weeks. We got all that and much more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time being here with us this time, making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 for your first bet, and if that wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You'll head over to FanDuel.com to get started. The New Orleans Saints connected on a big 87-yard touchdown this past weekend up against the New York Giants on a big downfield pass from Spencer Rattler, New Orleans Saints quarterback, to wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. And on that play, that could be one that you looked at and you went, finally, been waiting for that, all those other things. But what if I told you that the Saints actually started laying the framework for that very play all the way back in week 2 up against the San Francisco 49ers? We did a film study for this over with our insiders, which you can join by texting Who Dat to 504-285-7473 so you can get in on film studies and exclusive Q&As and much more content. You can also click the link in the description. But I wanted to give you a little bit of a rundown of it here on the show as well. But if you want to see the video with illustrations and all that kind of stuff, that is over with our insider program. The Saints went all the way back. I went all the way back to week 2 in the NFL, and I found from that point, really all the way back to the first game, but the first one that I found of a example of a 13 personnel first and 10 snap from under center. That's what the Saints were in during that 87-yard touchdown where they motioned Juwan Johnson from one side of the field, sort of in this over or across motion, but then brought him all the way to the outside, then ran that 2-man route on the right side of the field, and then ended up being able to kind of get some of these, the play action, and then, of course, getting that big connection downfield to Rashid Shaheed done. But if you go all the way back to week 2, you'll find a snap against the San Francisco 49ers that was 13 personnel, 2 tight ends lined up in line or tight to the line of scrimmage, another tight end in the backfield. Remember, even if they're lined up at fullback, wide receiver, slot receiver, tight end, or quarterback in Taysom Hill's case, or former case, now that he's designated a quarterback instead of a tight end, it doesn't really matter. But for all of these things, no matter where you line up, you're still considered a tight end when it comes to personnel groupings. And so 3 tight ends with 2 at the formation, at the line of scrimmage, and another in the formation in the backfield is still considered 13 personnel, 3 tight ends with 1 running back and 1 wide receiver. The Saints used that on a 2-yard run early on in the season, kind of a modest gain, didn't really do much with it, nothing fancy, just came out in that formation, ran the football. 2 weeks later, up against the Buffalo Bills, they came out in 13 personnel on first and 10 from under center 3 times. All 3 times, run. So now we're 4 for 4 for the New Orleans Saints through the first 3 games of 13 personnel, or through the first 4 games, actually. 13 personnel, first and 10, under center, run. All the runs for modest gains, 2 or 3 yards. Saints mixed in some things that were a little bit different. Sometimes the tandem of tight ends that's lined up tight to the line of scrimmage was on the field side. Sometimes they were on the boundary side. To give you a quick explainer on that, typically you start passes or you start plays with the center snapping from the hash marks. It just depends upon where the player was downed the play before. If they're downed on the right half of the field, you start at the right hash. Same thing happens over in the left hash. If you're down in the middle of the field, then you're at the middle. That's why sometimes you see, like late in games, a quarterback will take a snap and then just fall down in a direction to get the ball on the hash mark that the kicker wants to kick from. Sometimes kickers want to kick from the right hash, left hash. Sometimes they like kicking right down the middle, all those other things. That's kind of how that works. And so the side where you are taking the snap from, so if you're on the right hash mark, the right side of the field is considered the boundary side because it's the closest to the boundary. The left side of the field then would be considered the field side because there's more field available. So sometimes the two tight ends were lined up on the field side. Sometimes they were lined up on the boundary side. In other cases, they would motion and add some motion to where they're moving one of those tight ends from one side to the other. Other times they ran what was called a return motion, which is actually what the Saints did up against I think it was against the New York Giants earlier in that game. They ended up running another 13 personnel, 1st and 10, under center. They did it twice before the actual passing play. And again, all 6 times they ran the football. But there were some variations of the formation. Sometimes there was that return motion. Return motion is when you start crossing as a tight end or a player from one side of the field to the other side of the field, but then you reverse path and you go back and you return to your original spot on the field, hence return motion. Other times, earlier on in the game up against the New York Giants, they actually had Taysom Hill in the backfield, but not lined up at fullback or offset or in an offset eye. They ended up having him lined up kind of in the backfield, offset from the line of scrimmage, and they ran like a jet motion handoff to him, basically a jet sweep with him. And so the Saints did a couple different things out of this formation. Sometimes Brandon Cooks was the lone receiver. Sometimes Chris Olave was the lone receiver. Other times Rashid Shaheed was the lone receiver. But the one thing that they did 6 times out of 6, 13 personnel, 1st and 10 under center before they ended up actually throwing the football for an 87-yard touchdown was run the football. The best run that they had was actually earlier in the game against the Giants because they did this twice, 13 personnel, 1st and 10 under center, twice against the Giants before they ended up throwing the 87-yard touchdown pass. And that first run was actually a run to the weak side of the formation, or actually they changed the strong side. And then Alvin Kamara picked up like 11 yards on that run. So little things that they did there. But one of my other favorite things that they did when it came to the actual play, right, the one in question, the 87-yard touchdown, is that they took Juwan Johnson and instead of motioning him but keeping him in line, they motioned him all the way outside of the wide receiver in Rashid Shaheed, who was lined up tight to the formation, kind of a little bit closer because he was on that boundary side instead of the field side. And so when they motioned Juwan all the way to the outside of the formation, you could see the defense kind of start communicating, and all of a sudden they snap the ball, and then it's a play action. You can see the defense trying to communicate again. The Giants defense dropped 7 in coverage, but because you had Rashid Shaheed and Juwan Johnson running a half-field concept on the field side, that ended up giving a little bit of an opportunity for both those guys because it lessened the amount of bodies that went over there, because you'll sometimes have more over on the field side than the boundary side. And so even from the side from which Kellen Moore decided to deploy the 2-man route concept, it was intentional in terms of getting that done. And so this was just a really, really good example of something that Saints fans should be used to seeing here in New Orleans, because Sean Payton used to do this all the time, that you start building tendencies early on in the season and then break them as the season goes on. And when you break them successfully, sometimes you get these big explosive plays. And that's exactly what Kellen Moore did and exactly what the New Orleans Saints did. Even during the game against the Giants, we saw a few Taysom Hill runs and all the formation looked the same. You had 3 tight ends out there, you had 2 tight ends out there with Taysom and then a couple of receivers, and they would run the football. And then when they needed a 3rd and 2 to be converted, then all of a sudden Taysom Hill drops back and throws a 19-yard pass to Juwan Johnson. And so you're seeing it kind of examples of it in game, but then also examples of how it can blend and bridge games in terms of creating these tendencies and breaking these tendencies. We talk about the NFL being a chess match, but we don't just mean a 4-quarter chess match. It's a 17-game, 18-week chess match that you watch evolve and change over time. So a really good glimpse into the mind of Kellen Moore with the way that he built and began to architect plays like that. And I got to tell you, I think more is on the way, because after that, the Saints continuously came out in 13 personnel on 1st and 10 under center for the rest of the Giants game. So I'm excited to see what the Saints do moving forward and what the next wrinkle is for that personnel grouping. All right, coming up next, the New Orleans Saints defense has got to prove it up against the New England Patriots. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you won't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that $5 bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. That's all you got to do. Pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. One of the things that I love about FanDuel is just how much is on there. Not just NFL action, MLB action, NBA action, winning season, but also horse racing, tennis, golf, and so much more. Whatever it is that you're looking for, you're going to be able to find it over at FanDuel. One of my favorite things there, though, is live betting. I love live betting, especially in college football. And there's a heavy, really good favorite team, and they're trailing at halftime. It's a great place to go. Put down a little bit for a comeback victory. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. That's FanDuel.com. All right, family. I think one of the biggest things the New Orleans Saints defense in particular has to prove this weekend up against the New England Patriots is that what we saw against the New York Giants was not a fluke. I am not going to take away from the success of the young players that made some big plays for the New Orleans Saints going up against the New York Giants. We have seen over and over again, New Orleans Saints defenses struggle to be opportunistic when there are opportunities that are right there in their hands. You think about some of the dropped interceptions already this year, things like that, even going back to years before, right? The opportunities would present themselves, but not always being able to take advantage of those, whether that be via, pass rush or interceptions, takeaways, fumbles, balls on the ground, whatever it might be. Oftentimes, or a lot of times, they had some chances and weren't able to take advantage of those. It was great to watch this New Orleans Saints team going up against the New York Giants. Even when they were gifted a situation like Jackson Dart just dropping a football and like 8 times out of 10, that ball is recovered by the player that fumbled it. And instead, Cam Jordan able to get in there and recover. Now, I know Cam Jordan's not one of the young defensive core pieces, but seeing him and Demario Davis obviously set tones and then watching the young guys carry it through is all promising stuff. So I'm not going to take away from any of that. Kool-Aid McKinstry walking away with 2 interceptions. Obviously the 86-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown that went back for Jordan Howden with Kool-Aid McKinstry and Cam Jordan helping to block downfield. You look at the Jonas Sanker fumble recovery off the Demario Davis strip, which, by the way, one of my favorite things about that was NFL Films putting out a clip of it to where Demario Davis caused that fumble, and he gets up and he's literally asking Darius Slayton, "Was that me? Was that me? Did I rip that out?" And he starts looking around and he's like asking players, he's asking referees, "Was that me? Did I do that? Did I do it?" And then finally somebody tells him that he did it. It was great. It was awesome. And so just like seeing that kind of juice, that kind of energy from this New Orleans Saints defense was great and really, really good to see. And obviously you'd like to see it start a little bit faster, right? 14-0, 14-3 hole, not necessarily the way that you want to start off as a defense. Surrendering back-to-back touchdowns on the 2 opening possessions for New York. Obviously not what you want to do as a defense, but coming up with 2 forced punts and then 5 consecutive takeaways, pretty really good. Pretty really good. Terrell Burgess was really funny in the locker room. We were talking to him, and Seth Lewis and I, as well as a couple of other folks, were talking to him about how, hey, you got 5 takeaways, everything like that. And I mentioned that it was 5 consecutive, 5 in a row. And Terrell Burgess was like, "Oh, was it? It was 5 in a row? That's crazy. Oh, wow. 5 in a row? Really? Oh, okay, yeah. 5 in a row? Hold on." And it just like, it clicked. Like he clocked that it was 5 in a row, but then it didn't surprise him until slightly later. It was a really, really funny video. But it's stuff like that you want to see more of from the New Orleans Saints, and that you want to see more of for this New Orleans Saints defense, is to be surprised even by their own achievements. And last week was an achievement. 5 consecutive takeaways. The first time that's happened in the NFL since 2016. First time that it's happened for the New Orleans Saints since 1991, and we know how good that defense was. That defense actually did it twice in that season. And so now going into this follow-up game up against the New England Patriots, who have 7 turnovers, giveaways already this season, to 6 takeaways, so their turnover margin is -1. They're on the right side of the margin for an opportunistic defense. And they're going to need to take the football away and get the football back to this Saints offense, because you've got Stephon Diggs over on the other side. You've got Ramondre Stevenson, who has shown a little bit of an issue holding on to the football, so maybe something that the Saints can take advantage of. But you also have the player that at one point this season had the highest completion percentage in the NFL at 74% with quarterback Drake May with the New England Patriots. And so opportunities have to will present themselves, and the Saints will have to make good on those opportunities in order to get the ball back to their offense and allow them to be able to try to control this game as best as they can. This is going to be a big one for this New Orleans Saints defense. So now what they want to prove is that they are indeed takeaway machines more than the New York Giants are giveaway machines. You like that line? I wrote it over at LouisianaSports.net. I was very proud of it. Mentioned it in my pod with Nick Underhill as well. I love that line. But being able to do things like that, I mean, that's going to be a big part of not just this game against the New England Patriots, but just in terms of making a statement in terms of what your defense is moving forward. And you like to see the Saints do a couple different things, really all across, right? They gotta stop letting up so much pressure on the offensive side of the ball. They got to get better in the red zone. You want to keep those takeaways going. You want to be a better pressure defense too. Only 28%. I think that's 29th or 30th in the league right now, depending upon whose numbers you're looking at. Different analytics groups cite or qualify pressures differently. X many yards away from a quarterback requires a reaction from the quarterback, doesn't require a reaction from a quarterback. Everybody kind of looks at it a little bit differently. But all told, that's another place where the Saints could stand to get a little bit better. And if you get the pass rush cooking a little bit more, then that goes back to our original point of being able to build up those takeaways. Because if you can get the pass rush cooking and you can get quarterbacks off balance a little bit, making bad decisions, throwing bad balls, all those other things, then you have those opportunities present themselves that you can try to take advantage of over on the defensive side, in the back end, on the secondary. And so with Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alontae Taylor in base reps on the outside, Alontae Taylor moves inside during nickel reps. You get rookie Quincy Riley out there. You got rookie Jonas Sanker, and then we'll see if Justin Reed is back in time. He is in concussion protocol. If not, Jordan Howden played a solid game last week, but now you're going up against a really, really good wide receiver. A really, really good wide receiver. These last 2 weeks, you've gone up against okay wide receiver groups. The Buffalo Bills wide receiver groups, not great. The New York Giants wide receiver group is good. Is great when they've got Malik Neighbors, is not when they don't, right? So they were missing a big key piece. And so now going up against Stephon Diggs and this otherwise okay wide receiver group in New England, it's a perfect example of you figuring out just how much you're able to maybe get done. Like, what is your ability to produce against an okay group, but also stand up to a star level player in Stephon Diggs. And so this will be a big time prove it game, I think, for the New Orleans Saints defense, and in particular their secondary amongst those young players. If they can come back and start making plays again, it doesn't mean that they have to get 5 takeaways in a row all over again. But if they can walk away with 2 or 3 takeaways, you're going to feel a lot better about this New Orleans Saints defense. And if the Saints defense is able to also keep points off the board as a whole, I think that's the other thing that you end up looking at and going, okay, cool. Like, the light at the end of the tunnel is getting a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter. I can start to see the turn now where it starts to happen. I don't know that the Saints necessarily found that last week. I think they found it in the game, but as we talked about before, I don't know if they necessarily found that for their season, right? We're not talking about this New Orleans Saints team as anything other than they are still, which is a rebuilding team that's trying to figure out its quarterback position, trying to evaluate some of its young players, and it's probably in for a rough season. And so this week, massive for the New Orleans Saints defense to prove what's real and what might have just been a fluke. And they'd like to show you, of course, that it's all real. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints added a veteran corner in Michael Davis, somebody very familiar with Brandon Staley. But it actually kind of says that there's going to be a lot more opportunities for the young players in the secondary, even though they added a veteran. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints announced a flurry of roster moves on Tuesday, the headline of which being the signing of eighth year veteran cornerback Michael Davis. But don't worry, this probably won't take any playing time away from young players. In fact, it could mean that more is on the way. We appreciate you very much for being here with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, share, all that good stuff here to help support the show. The Saints coming off their first win. People are very excited about all that, so make sure your Saints fans and your fellow Saints fans can find us here as we produce every single Monday through Friday and then some on Locked On at Saints. And of course, you can catch us every single Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. over on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. All right, so the Saints signed Michael Davis amidst a flurry of other moves, which we'll get to here in a moment, including a wave that I think is important to highlight. But the signing of Michael Davis was one that maybe had some people asking questions like, is there an injury that the Saints need to be concerned about with one of their young guys? Do you go and sign a guy like Michael Davis, who's got 8 years, he's in his 8th year in the NFL. He has a big time connection with Brandon Staley. He was in Brandon Staley's defense from 2021 through 2023, while Brandon Staley was the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. 37 of his 70 career passes defense all came during those 3 years with Brandon Staley, and he's got 7 or 8 interceptions on his career, 8 interceptions on his career as well. So do you put this guy on the field? Probably not, if I'm being honest. I think that this might be a little bit more tied to Isaac Yiadom's injury. He had that hamstring injury that took place Wednesday during practice. It kept him out of Sunday's game, allowed the team to go out there and start Quincy Riley, who appeared for 37 coverage snaps, 54 total defensive snaps. He was targeted 4 times, allowed just 1 catch, and that catch only went for 7 yards. Now, again, that was up against a subpar New York Giants wide receiver group, but you still saw some really promising things from Quincy Riley, and especially what he can do coming down and run support, helping out there. He does a lot of the finer things that you look for. Finer Things Club, anybody, Office fans? But he does a lot of the finer things that you look for a player in the secondary, and in particular, a young cornerback as well. I mean, having a guy that can cover and take the football away is one thing, but having a guy that can tackle, cover, and take the football away is a whole different ball game, and that's where Quincy Riley seems to be. And so I don't think that this means that you're going to see Michael Davis starting over Quincy Riley with Kool-Aid McKinstry on the outside and then Alontae Taylor in the slot, or even Michael Davis starting over Alontae Taylor when Alontae Taylor's on the outside. I thought Taylor had a really strong game Sunday up against the New York Giants as well. But I think that what this really means is that whatever's going on with Isaac Yiadom is likely to potentially keep him out for another week. And so because of that, and again, hamstring injuries are always a win, not if, so you're always really cautious about those. And so adding a guy like Michael Davis, just make sure you have the cornerback numbers right? You got Rajon Wright, you've got, those other corners that we've already named, but now you might want that other guy in the room, and that's where I think Michael Davis can certainly be helpful. And to have somebody in the room that has played under Brandon Staley as a defensive play caller, I think is incredibly valuable for these young defenders too that are still adjusting to their new scheme. I think that's going to be really, really important for the entire secondary, but particularly, of course, at the cornerback position. So I think those are kind of the reasons why you go after Michael Davis and you bring him in. I don't think, this is my early, I would say, assumption more than it is a sourced piece of information or anything like that. But I just don't think that the Saints are going to, start benching any of their young guys anytime soon, especially when none of them have done anything worthy of being benched for. So we'll see where things go. But I think it's got more to do with Isaac Yiadom than it has to do with any of the young players. To highlight the rest of the roster moves that the Saints made in order to make room for Michael Davis on the roster, they moved on from running back and kick returner Velus Jones Jr. We're going to circle back to that here in a little bit. They added 2 players to their practice squad, Ronnie Bell, the veteran wide receiver, as well as rookie tight end, 7th round pick Moliki Matavao, who we expected would be back here in New Orleans after he was waived earlier this week to make room for Taysom and Foster and all that. But the Saints also terminated 3 practice squad contracts. It's key to remember that number, 3 practice squad contracts. Defensive end Garrett Nelson had his contract terminated, as well as tackle. I think it's Sataoa LeMayo, but I'm not sure, so I'm sorry if I screwed that up. And then wide receiver Tommy Mellott. Those three have been moved on from, but only two have been added, Bell and Matavao. And so now Velus Jones Jr. pretty clearly has a path back to the team via the practice squad, as the Saints have 16 of their possible 17 spots filled, knowing that Charlie Smith has an international exemption and therefore it doesn't count against the 16-man roster on the practice squad there. So that's kind of what I'm expecting, is that Velus Jones Jr. will clear waivers and then come back to New Orleans. He's averaged just barely over 22 yards per kick return, hasn't really gotten involved in the run game. So I would expect that before the Saints put like Taysom Hill or Rashid Shaheed back on kick return duties, that they'll probably bring Velus Jones Jr. back, and then they have 3 weeks to elevate him, and then probably move him back to the active roster once the health reestablishes and you don't need the veteran corner anymore because you have Isaac Yiadom back, or whatever the decision is that's made there, or at some other position. I think very quickly these things, they all kind of work themselves out, but I don't expect Velus Jones Jr. to be headed anywhere else very quickly, though we'll see. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised to see him back on the practice squad is kind of the way that I would see this going for him. So, and you'd certainly love to see the kick return unit be a little bit more effective. I think that Kendre Miller has had some really nice returns, but Velus Jones Jr. in that speed, definitely want to be seeing a little bit more from him in that area of the game. So those are the roster moves that we've seen. I don't think you're going to see young guys in the secondary losing playing time, but it just kind of makes sense. Oh, and with Garrett Nelson being waived, we'll see what that means. We'll see when it comes down to everything going on with Chase Young. So we'll see what happens there. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, Crossover Thursday, Nick Cattle's Locked On Patriots and I will break it all down for you. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, let me know how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.